I think it's fair to say we've had the tin hats on for a couple of years now. I've been here for 10 years nearly, and I haven't known anything like it. But it feels like we're just beginning to emerge from a difficult time, and we're back on the front foot a bit. And the most encouraging thing is that during that time, we've got a 7-day operation now, and probably the most difficult time for newspapers. And I still get on the tube every morning and see people reading the paper with a smile on their face, and that encourages me every day. Well, I think the fact that 20 million people buy and get involved in mid-market newspapers every single day, it's not a bad start. And you know, critics might say that newspapers can't be trusted, but the only poll I'm interested in is the one that shows 2.3 million people every single day putting their hand in their pocket and buying what we put a lot of love and a lot of effort into producing. So that's what matters to me. And I don't think any other media really connects with a readership or an audience in the same way that newspapers do. I still get the same feeling every morning when I pick up the newspaper from my local newsagent and sit and read it on the train, and I pick up things every single day that put a smile on my face or get me thinking, and I'm proud of that. I love that, and I read the paper still from back to front. I love the sport, and it's great to still enjoy the newspaper as a consumer, as a punter, and as an ordinary member of society. I still love that every single day, as much as I did as a teenager growing up. To see how the Sun's developing and evolving as part of social networking, and the conversation that now happens because of the paper. We are so accountable. There's a lot of talk about the press not being accountable and having this cavalier spirit, but I wake up every single morning to around about 100 tweets talking about what I've written that day, criticising me, suggesting I might have it wrong, saying that's brilliant, you're absolutely right. And it's great to have that conversation. So it's great to see how newspapers are evolving as part of a multi-platform, part of the social networking scene. I think the Facebook site for the Sun now has something around about 350 or 400,000 followers. So the conversation we see on Facebook is huge. You know, there are lots of comments after the stories on the website, but where we exist on other platforms now, the conversation is massive. And as a younger member of staff here, I do kind of feel like I'm quite heavily involved in that. Maybe to the detriment of what I'm writing in the paper half the time, because I do find myself concentrating a lot on what the readers think about what I say. I think the things I've been most proud of over the years have been getting involved in huge charity singles. So the Live 8 campaign back in 2005 was a really exciting thing for me, because my earliest memories were Live Aid in 1984-85, around that time. So to be a part of that the second time around was really, really exciting. And to play a part in promoting that and being there on the day covering the event as 2 billion people around the world watched, that was really exciting. The Helping Haiti campaign was great. And then as a bigger picture at the Sun, being involved in Help for Heroes, going along to the Millies and big events like that we put on, it's great to see the difference the paper can make and the part we can play in the forces' lives, the families of the forces, things like that have been great to be a part of. Every day I walk in at the Sun, there's a sign that says, "Walk tall, you're entering Sun Country." And over the last few years, you know, I look at guys like Brian Flynn, who works as an investigative reporter here, and he produces some fantastic work. You know, you look at stuff recently, and he uncovered, I think it was a Serbian warlord living in southeast London, and handed him over to the police. And this is a guy with a serious past. That hard work and that dedication to the job has put a man behind bars that otherwise would have been walking the streets. And I think it's fantastic to walk shoulder to shoulder with those guys every day. There's a lot of competition between us, right enough, but you know, you look recently at the Telegraph breaking the story of Danny Nightingale, the soldier who came back from Afghanistan with a weapon that he was gifted by a soldier, and then the hard graft by all the papers collectively to free that man. It was incredible to see, and as he walked out of the steps at court and was free with a smile on his face was a brilliant moment and a real triumph for a free press. And after Leveson and everything we've talked about, that's a brilliant example of what papers can do in this country. I think I respect any journalist who's earning a living producing work every day, because as things stand, it's probably the most difficult time to work in this industry. So anybody that can be paid and have a platform to write their views and their hard work through the contacts they've built up over a long period of time, I will always have respect for that, because it's a difficult thing to do. I think historically the relationship between editorial and commercial has been frosty, I think, to say the least. But I'd like to think that that's beginning to soften slightly, and I actually really try my best and try really hard to spend as much time as possible with the commercial guys, because they can be a huge help to me, especially in my arena, you know, working in show business. If we can engage with big companies, it actually helps with access now to celebrity. So I've got to keep one eye on that. Things were a bit different in the past, but now we really have to engage with them because, you know, readership, we have to be honest, and circulation is on the down and is on the decline. So we have to keep an eye on how we improve our advertising digitally as we move more into that arena. Well, as a young person, I think I'd probably say that I can see the future of digital. But as a traditional guy who's always worked for newspapers, I will always like the physical copy. And I still can't see myself sitting with a tablet on the underground or on a bus reading a newspaper. I think I'll always like the hard copy. One of my favourite things about the Sun is that I go to dinner parties, you know, I go to the pub, and a lot of people will be really interested in my job, and a lot of them will say, I don't read the Sun. And then after 5 or 10 minutes, they'll tell you their favourite headline, their favourite story, some trick we've done, a campaign we've been involved in, a sports story we broke. So all of them do. It's one of those things. You know, my brother's a dentist, my dad's a doctor. In the waiting room, the Sun's always the paper you can't get your hands on when it comes to tea break, because everyone wants to read it. The most important thing for anybody that doesn't work in the newspaper industry but works around it is to understand the paper, know the people who write for it, know the columnists, know the sections, know the puzzles page, know it inside out, know Dear Deirdre. I think it's important you understand the DNA of the paper and what matters to the people who care so much about how it's produced. If you don't get that, you will never connect with editorial. So you have to buy into that and understand the DNA, otherwise it just won't work. The one thing that I always try and get across, distilling complicated issues in a way that people can understand. There's a real skill to that. Because, you know, for most criticism I get, people say, oh, your paper's just a comic. And I'll say, oh, really? Well, Bill Clinton's written for us. John Tamu is a columnist for us. I think we've got quite a broad church when it comes to people that write for us. You know, Alex James, one of the best musicians in the country, writes a food column for the Sun newspaper. I think that's fantastic, you know. I had a very good description of how it works very recently about throwing a pebble into a pond and the ripple effect from that story. It is huge. If I turn the TV on in the morning, every show will be discussing a story in the Sun that day. If I listen to the radio in the morning, we've set the agenda on certain things. That goes across the board. It doesn't just mean politics, show business, sport. You tune into Talk Sport every day and there's a Sun sports story in there, setting the agenda. And then go beyond that and you look on Facebook, you look on Twitter, the conversation follows Sun stories. They're everywhere. We are a huge part of this country, and I think we play and serve such an important part in this democracy because we connect with so many ordinary men and ordinary women, and it's something I'm really proud to be a part of. It's a bit of a frustration for me sometimes listening to the radio, because on one hand you might hear some criticism for what we're doing, but at the same time their entire conversation is about what we're doing. And remove that from the equation and you've got some very quiet airwaves. So I think it's essential that a vibrant tabloid press exists in this country, because it does set the agenda so often and start the conversation and the chatter. It's such an important point to make at the moment, I think, about trust and newspapers. So many people say that newspapers can't be trusted, but the big issue for me at the moment is the effect of social networking on news being broken. Because things will appear on Twitter. They won't be checked, they won't be run by lawyers, there's no consideration of the PCC. People just stick stuff up there and off it goes. And, you know, we've been trained for years and understand the law on these things, and it's a really careful and considered thing. This cavalier spirit people talk about doesn't exist. It does exist in social networking. So now more than ever, a considered, educated, sensible press is such a valuable thing to have, because you have to trust that piece of paper you're reading in the morning, because I don't think people do quite realise just how little you can trust the news you read on social networking. I remember being at a dinner party and somebody said to me, is it correct, Gordon, that the reading age of the Sun is 7? And I kind of sat back and thought about it for a second, and I thought, well, I think I could work for any newspaper in this country, but I'm pretty sure a lot of journalists at other newspapers couldn't work for the Sun. And that was good enough for me.